Elsewhere, NATO leaders are concluding day one of the NATO summit, and while expressing solidarity with Ukraine was the goal, it has also divided allies. That part is making headlines.
That's right. Foreign correspondent Alex Salvi is live in Lithuania, in Vilnius specifically, where the NATO conference is being held, with the latest. Alex.
Bob, Katrina, as you were saying, the NATO summit in Vilnius was billed as a showing of unity, but it's an airing of grievances that's stealing the spotlight tonight. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy issuing a blistering statement on Twitter, criticizing leaders for refusing to provide Kyiv with a timeline to join the alliance, calling it unprecedented and absurd. That rant's coming in response to President Biden and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg saying leaders agreed on language to be used, laying out a path forward for Ukrainian membership, saying an invitation will be extended when allies agree that certain conditions are met.
Your leadership really matters, and we agree on the language that we proposed, that you proposed, relative to the future of Ukraine being able to join NATO.
President Zelenskyy landing in Vilnius tonight, greeted by a massive crowd gathering in support of Ukraine, and a day earlier than initially reported and ahead of a meeting with President Biden on Wednesday. His frustrations coming one day after Turkey agreed to back Sweden's application to NATO after blocking that bid for nearly a year, a move celebrated during President Biden's meeting with President Tayyip Erdogan.
You made all the more historic by the agreement you reached yesterday and the addition of Sweden and how you're going to proceed. I want to thank you for your diplomacy and your courage to take that on. And I want to thank you for your leadership.
But the lasting impression as day one of the summit concludes is the sharp criticisms levied by Zelenskyy, while the White House insists that although NATO is in Ukraine's future, it's a conversation that won't even begin until the war is over. Bob, Katrina.
All right. Thank you very much, Alex. Meanwhile, the two-day NATO summit in Lithuania could become one of the most consequential gatherings for the alliance in modern history. It comes about a month after Ukraine's counteroffensive and weeks after that failed mutiny in Russia.
President Biden meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy during today's meeting. Newsmax host John Bachman takes a look back on the history of these NATO summits and what's at stake. John.
The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, started in 1949 as a military alliance designed to safeguard Europe, the United States, and their trade routes from the Soviets. Over the years, its mission has expanded around the world, but now key questions loom large about its future. Can President Biden and other NATO allies get a handle on the war in Ukraine? What is the long-term strategy for the expansion of the alliance? And who will succeed the current NATO Secretary General? April 4th, 1949, NATO's original members come together to sign the North Atlantic Treaty in Washington, D.C. The treaty created a common defense structure against Soviet expansion into the West that had begun during World War II. As World War II ended and after Germany surrendered in Europe, the Soviet army occupied much of Eastern Europe. Yet the Soviets refused to remove their forces after the war. These countries would later form communist governments in alliance with the Soviet Union and pose a clear and present danger to the West. And since its inception, NATO has expanded its membership, and as of 2023, it now includes 31 members, Finland being the last to join in April of 2023. Later, during the height of the Cold War and under the leadership of President Ronald Reagan, NATO's deterrence strategy helped bring the Soviet Union to its knees. Under Reagan, it was clear the doctrine of collective defense meant something.
The wall cannot withstand freedom.
After the fall of the Soviet Union, NATO changed, and its mission expanded to peacekeeping and stabilization efforts in the Balkans in the 1990s. That included conflicts in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Macedonia.
Vladimir Putin.
The fall of the Soviet Union led many to believe that Russia no longer posed a threat. This belief showed itself in the 2012 presidential debate when Mitt Romney said that Russia was a geopolitical foe for the United States, and Barack Obama mockingly replied with this.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back.
course, on 9/11/2001, NATO's Article 5 clause was enacted for the first time. It stated that an attack on one member state was effectively an attack on all member states, and it triggered the involvement of member states in the global war on terror in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere around the world. The United States has dominated NATO's funding. All member states commit to spending a minimum 2% of their respective GDP on defense, but several countries have fallen short of this target, leading to debates and concerns about burden sharing within the alliance. As of today, only 11 of the NATO members are expected to meet their 2% target, but that is a huge improvement that started back during the Trump administration. In 2014, only the United States, the UK, and Greece met their obligations. Today, Germany and Canada still continue to miss theirs, and it's not even close. President Biden has said that the war with Russia must end before NATO can consider membership for Ukraine. Now, after this NATO summit in Lithuania, President Biden will wrap up his trip with a stop in Finland to meet with leaders of Nordic countries. And like Ukraine, which is seeking NATO membership, Finland shares a border with Russia, and it became the 31st member nation back in April. Back to you.
All right, John Bachman, thanks so much for the great explanation. And joining us now to discuss is Senior Fellow for the Heritage Foundation, Victoria Coates, Ukrainian Member of Parliament, Kira Rudik, and former FBI agent Michael Grimm. Kira, I want to start with you. President Zelenskyy, as we know, not happy about NATO's decision regarding Ukrainian members or Ukraine membership in NATO. Your reaction to that?
Hello, Bob. Hello, Katrina. Thank you so much for having me. You know, if there is one thing that we learned to hear over the last 16 months, it is the word no, or things that, oh, it is impossible, you cannot do that. And what we learned is no matter the answer, to push forward and to reach our goal. We heard no so many times about the tanks, about Patriot missiles, about getting candidacy to European Union. So right now, for us, no is just another step, and we will be pushing forward to reach our goals. I want to point out that there was another decision that many deemed impossible that was made and announced today about the training of Ukrainian pilots on the F-16s fighter jets. If you look back only for 2 months ago, it was impossible, and so many people were saying that it would never happen. But it is happening right now, and same way we do believe that we will get our clear path to NATO ASAP.
Michael, NATO would be a big carrot, if you will, for Ukraine. When you have something like that to offer, there have to be conditions, I would think. You're somebody who's been over there in Ukraine. You follow the politics here. And there has to be an end to this war somewhere down the road for this to even happen, because Article 5 means that you have to go protect everything, even when it's not defined, the territory and changing. So what would you do in this situation?
Well, Bob, first of all, you're spot on. There does have to be an end to this conflict, right? So the only way I can see the Ukrainian people and their President Zelenskyy agreeing to give up even an inch. You know, when I was there, they were very clear. And I was with the military and the police embedded with them. We are not giving an inch is what their position has been and still is. However, I think the one carrot that could change that, let's just say that the war compromise was that Russia keeps its eastern gains and a little bit of that south to attach to Crimea. It keeps those areas that it has control of now, and in return, they get NATO. Ukraine becomes a NATO member, and therefore those borders going forward, even though their country has been encroached upon, those new borders would be protected. That's the only thing I can possibly see as a solution at this time.
Victoria, what is standing out most to you? What would you like to comment on?
Well, I think, Katrina, what's most concerning to me is not the statements of President Zelenskyy, which I think are completely understandable given the position that he's in. But I think the equivocation of both President Macron and President Biden has made this a very difficult situation. I think it should have been clear over a year ago that NATO is going to have a very hard time fast-tracking a country that's in a state of war, because you are then committing all the members of the alliance to that war. Immediately upon accession into NATO. So that is a problem. I think that there should be a path for Ukraine. I think there should have been earlier. But in this case, I think both Macron and Biden were not clear with Ukraine about what was possible and what wasn't possible. And this has led to friction and difficulty during a summit when the message should be unity and support for Ukraine.
Final word, Kira.
Well, we are a country that have gone through this painful experience of the Budapest Memorandum, when we gave up our nuclear arsenal for the promises that our sovereignty will be protected. It did not happen. We are not requesting that we would become members of NATO right away. We understand that the war needs to end, but we want to see a very clear path of how this is going to happen and political assurances that it will happen really soon and that the end of the war would mean our beginning of the members as a member of alliance. We did not hear it this time, but we are sure that we will push forward and will receive our yes really soon.
All right, Kira Rudik, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe. Victoria Coates, thank you. Michael, stand by.